there and welcome to World News Program. I'm Miriam Zian and these are your headlines. Hamas confirmed dealing positively with a mediator's proposal after the U.S. envoy proposed extending the ceasefire agreement at a time when the movement's negotiating delegation arrived in Cairo to follow up on developments in the negotiation process. Next, Morocco's violations in Western Sahara are once again on the agenda of EU parliamentarians who condemn the Mahsen's methods of legitimizing its occupation, warnings against its attempts to advance its expansionist projects. Also coming up, Putin sends a letter to Trump regarding a ceasefire, as Trump dubs the talk productive, while Zelensky embraces the U.S. proposal for unconditional silence. And China and Russia support Tehran's nuclear program in a joint statement following a meeting of senior diplomats in Beijing. Iran affirms that its program is peaceful and accuses the parties involved of violating their obligations. Hello and welcome back to the details of the program. Hamas has announced that its leadership had received a proposal from mediators to resume negotiations. The Islamic resistance movement said it has submitted its response to the proposal, which includes its approval to release Israeli soldier Aidan Alexander, who holds American citizenship, in addition to the remains of 4 others with dual nationality. Hamas reaffirmed its full readiness to begin negotiations and reach a comprehensive agreement on the second phase of discussions, calling for Israel to be compelled to fully implement its commitments. The U.S. news site Axios revealed details of a plan by American envoy Steve Witkoff to extend the Gaza ceasefire for additional weeks in exchange for the release of a number of living hostages and the remains of the deceased captives. According to a well-informed source cited by Axios, mediators met with Hamas officials in Doha on Wednesday evening and presented them with Witkoff's updated proposal. The plan includes extending the ceasefire until the 20th of next month in exchange for the release of at least 5 living hostages and the remains of approximately 9 deceased captives on the first day of the extended truce. The same source stated that Witkoff's proposal also includes the entry of food aid into Gaza during the ceasefire extension. And Hamas announced that its negotiating delegation led by Khalil al-Hayya was heading to Cairo to meet with Egyptian officials and follow up on the latest developments regarding the negotiations and ceasefire agreement. In a statement on Friday, Hamas reiterated its full readiness to begin negotiations and reach a comprehensive agreement on the second phase of discussions, stressing the need to ensure Israel fulfills its commitments. And Hamas stated that it is determined to implement the ceasefire agreement in all its phases, adding that any violation by the occupation of what was agreed upon would bring the negotiations back to square one. Hamas leader Hussam Badran confirmed on Friday that the movement had asked the mediators to oblige the occupation to adhere to the ceasefire agreement, stop the violations, and complete all the provisions that were approved.
We are determined to implement the ceasefire agreement in all its stages, and any violation by the occupation of what was agreed upon will bring us back to the starting point. We call on the mediators to oblige the occupation to adhere to the ceasefire agreement, stop the violations, and complete all provisions that were approved. We also welcome any proposals that would push toward the implementation of the ceasefire agreement with the Zionist occupation, ensuring the rights of our people who will thwart all plans of displacement and will remain a shield to protect the Al-Aqsa Mosque from the occupation's brutality and its Judaization efforts.
The government media office in Gaza warned that the coming hours will bring further deterioration of the tragic humanitarian situation in terms of living conditions, health, and the environment due to the blockade. In a statement, the office said that more than 2 million Palestinians in the Gaza Strip are living in a tragic situation due to the closure of all crossings by the occupation, depriving them of all the essentials of life and turning Gaza into a large prison.
We want that the coming hours will bring further deterioration of the tragic humanitarian situation on the living, health, and environmental fronts, with the deepening of famine, the lack of food and water security, and the near-total collapse of the service and health systems. 90% of Gaza's population cannot find a source of water, and municipalities are forced to ration the operation of wells to conserve the limited fuel available and ensure that water reaches citizens for as long as possible. There is a near-complete halt to transportation and movement, making it difficult for citizens to carry out their daily activities, including the ability of patients or the wounded to reach hospitals and medical centers. These indicators reflect the reality faced by more than 2 million Palestinians inside Gaza after the Zionist occupation decided to kill them slowly and turned Gaza into a large prison.
The United Nations has warned that the continued closure of border crossings preventing humanitarian aid from entering Gaza is severely affecting its ability to provide essential support to those in need. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs stated that the longer this blockade persists, the more devastating the consequences will be on the ground. With public resources stretched thin and daily necessities running low, Palestinians in the Gaza Strip live under a repeated cycle of hunger. The Zionist entity continues to close border crossings and restricts access to food, water, and fuel. Usama Ayadi has more.
Food is becoming increasingly scarce in the Gaza Strip after the Zionist entity cut off fuel supplies to the region, leaving residents of the Strip in fear of hunger without the ability to do basic cooking. As the Zionist forces continue to close the Gaza Strip crossings, several bakeries have shut down due to the depletion of gas needed to operate them. Hundreds of Palestinians are once again lining up for hours to obtain bread, a task that has become extremely challenging.
I waited in line for over 3 hours just to get one loaf of bread. I had to come early to make sure I can get some. We're afraid that the bakeries will close.
Palestinians have been forced to return to cooking their food over open fires after the domestic gas supplies run out. Their suffering deepens as the search of firewood and drinking water becomes increasingly difficult.
We've been living in a tent since we returned, and we haven't had cooking gas for 2 months. We cook our food over a fire, but firewood is scarce. We're using cardboard now, which affects my health.
At the same time, food stocks, including meat and dairy products, are running low, and demand for food increases, which has exacerbated shortages. This leaves Gazans vulnerable to hunger and disease.
In just a few days, we will face a worsening humanitarian crisis. The most vulnerable, women, children, the elderly, and the sick, will suffer the most. Deprived of even the most basic necessities, severe hunger is imminent.
Fuel shortages and power outages have severely affected water supplies. UNICEF has warned that water shortages in Gaza have reached critical levels, with only 1 in 10 people currently able to access safe drinking water.
Israel's military campaign against Tulkarem in its refugee camp has arrested or entered its 47th consecutive day, while the offensive on Nur Shams refugee camp has persisted for 34 days. According to the Palestinian news agency Wafa, the escalation includes live gunfire, stun grenades, and the sound of explosions accompanied by intensified surveillance drone activity. Israeli occupation forces imposed strict restrictions on Friday on the entry of worshippers from the West Bank into occupied Al-Quds to perform the second Friday prayer of the holy month of Ramadan at Al-Aqsa Mosque. The occupation forces reinforced their presence at the Qalandiya military checkpoint north of occupied Al-Quds and the 300 checkpoint separating Beit Lahem and occupied Al-Quds. European parliamentarians from northern European countries condemned Morocco's use of Danish business consultancy to promote fishery resources and agricultural products from Western Sahara in Europe, which they say are exploited illegally by the Moroccan regime. In a statement addressed to the Danish consultancy Ruud Pedersen, which has been placed on a blacklist, the parliamentarians from Denmark, Sweden and Finland called for severing all direct and indirect ties with the Moroccan occupation. They affirmed that the firm would remain on the blacklist until it ceases cooperation with the Moroccan occupation.
As Nordic members of the European Parliament, we are very aware of the Danish business office of Ruud Pedersen. Perhaps naively, we hoped it would adhere to certain standards, but it seems we were wrong. What you are doing, indirectly by representing the business interests of an occupying power, is unethical and contrary to the reputation and standards of the Nordic countries. We cannot and do not want to support this. We therefore inform you that as long as you continue to defend the interests of an occupying power like Morocco, directly or indirectly, we will refuse to meet with you, not only on issues related to Morocco or Western Sahara, but on everything.
The European parliamentarians called for adherence to UN resolutions on this matter, warning against the Moroccan regime's continued attempts to advance its expansionist occupation projects.
Morocco is constantly attempting to conclude various agreements with the European Union that include the illegal exploitation of the resources of occupied Western Sahara, despite the fact that neither the European Union nor the United Nations recognizes the legitimacy of this practice. We shouldn't repeat it, but goods coming illegally from occupied territories cannot and should not be the subject of a trade agreement with the European Union. Morocco's prolonged occupation, repression and exploitation of Western Sahara is simply illegal, and this further confirms the fact that the United Nations has classified Western Sahara as a non-self-governing territory. This is the kind of exploitation that we, as left-wing politicians, will always oppose.
The chair of the Mexican Senate's Foreign Relations Committee for Africa, Alma Carolina Vigiano Austria, reaffirmed her country's steadfast support for the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination. During their meeting with Algerian Council of the Nation member Sami Al-Halmi on the sidelines of the Global Conference of Women Parliamentarians held in Mexico City, members of the committee stressed the need to counter foreign interventions that support the occupation and to work toward a just resolution of the Sahrawi issue, ensuring the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination. And Moroccan organizations have renewed their condemnation of the Makhzen regime's continued normalization with the Zionist entity. The Moroccan Front for Supporting Palestine and Against Normalization called the Makhzen stance disgraceful amid rising repression of anti-normalization activists.
Moroccan Front for Palestine Support and Anti-Normalization strongly condemns the disgraceful visit of certain pro-Zionist Moroccans and their dangerous statements praising Israeli terrorism against Palestinians and recognizing the occupation's right to Palestinian land. The Front demands accountability and prosecution of those involved. It also denounces the repression faced by anti-normalization activists and Palestine supporters, calling for the release of detainees, an end to prosecutions, and the severance of all ties with the criminal Zionist entity.
With Libya's crisis still unresolved, the new head of the UN support mission, Hannah Tete, begins her first moves. Her visit to Algeria signals a shift towards a solution driven by Libya's neighbors, aiming to restore stability and unity. Hossein Burkan tells you more.
With the rapid development in Libya and the accelerating positions of influential or even affected countries by the conflict, the United Nations support mission in Libya is beginning its first moves nearly 2 months after the appointment of its new head, Hannah Tete. Algeria was the first destination for the Ghanaian diplomat, a visit that signals what seems to be conviction within the mission and the United Nations as a whole that the solution for Libya must stem from its neighboring countries. One of the biggest obstacles to resolving the crisis in Libya, if not the biggest, is foreign interference. which serves the interests of intervening parties. Therefore, the primary task of the new UN mission in Libya leadership will be to establish an inclusive Libya-led process that does not exclude or marginalize anyone, free from all forms of external interference, whether regional or international. Among the challenges facing the 10th head of UN mission in Libya since its establishment in 2011 will be the challenge of organizing free and fair elections that grant legitimacy to Libya's state's institutions. This legitimacy will enable national institutions to be independent in their decisions, allowing them to eliminate all forms of divisions and fragmentation in the Libyan scene. Given the numerous actors involved in the Libyan crisis and their role in fueling the conflict between Libyan factions, UN mission in Libya must prioritize linking the resolution of the crisis to strengthening Libya's national unity and safeguarding its territorial integrity. The country has suffered from nearly 15 years of instability caused by both internal and external parties. Its consequences, however, are borne only by the Libyan people.
The United Nations mission in Libya affirmed that the UN's effort to support authorities in managing illegal migration align with Libya's national priorities, while stressing the importance of preserving the country's sovereignty. In a statement, the UN mission expressed deep concern over a misinformation campaign that fuels tensions in Libya and incites hate speech against refugees and migrants. It urged all concerned parties to refrain from spreading false information and to ensure that public discourse is based on facts while fully respecting human rights. Algeria's permanent representative to the UN, Ambassador Ammar Ben Jamal's call for the promotion of South-South and triangular cooperation in support of peace building and sustaining peace. Addressing a session of the Peacebuilding Committee, PBC, on the first annual dialogue on peace building fund, Mr. Ben Jamal stressed that the PBC can strengthen the connection between peace-building efforts and national development plans.
In this era of limited funding, the criteria for resource allocation must include a combination of urgency, the potential for sustaining impact, and alignment with national peacebuilding priorities. The fund should enhance its support for South-South and triangular cooperation as a complementary approach by sharing successful practices, fostering peer-to-peer learning, and creating platform for innovating collaboration. Finally, national ownership must remain at the heart of the PBA initiative by empowering local institutions and ensuring robust consultation processes. The PBC can strengthen the connection between peacebuilding efforts and national development plans.
U.S. President Donald Trump said Friday a ceasefire that could halt fighting in Russia's war with Ukraine could be close at hand. This comes as Vladimir Putin has praised Donald Trump for doing everything to improve relations between Moscow and Washington. Nabil Khazini has more.
The drums of the war in Ukraine may soon fall silent, as US President Donald Trump and his Russian counterpart hinted that the countdown to a ceasefire is steadily approaching. A US delegation flew to Moscow to engage in talks on the ongoing war in Ukraine, a key moment where diplomacy took center stage. US President described the discussions on the proposed ceasefire deal as good and productive, reflecting the cautious optimism that now surrounds the potential for peace.
Complete ceasefire, and we hope Russia will do the same.
I think we're doing well, as you have been hearing about Ukraine. I think we're doing now well with Russia. We're speaking with President Putin. We want to get the war over. We've had some very good calls today with Russia and with Ukraine. They've agreed for a ceasefire if we can get it with Russia, and it's not easy. It's a tough one, but I think we're doing it.
The Kremlin announced that Russian President Vladimir Putin has sent his US counterpart a message about his proposal for a ceasefire in Ukraine and that there were grounds for cautious optimism. Though the diplomatic dialogue between Washington and Moscow was likely to cause further alarm in Kiev, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky embraced the US proposal for unconditional silence, marking a movement towards the end of the war.
Багато дипломатії, багато перемовин.
A lot of diplomacy, a lot of negotiations that can bring peace closer. Now on the table is the American proposal of unconditional silence in the sky, at sea and on the front. Ukraine accepts this proposal, rapid movement towards guaranteed security, towards the end of this war, towards a reliable peace. Our teams worked very well at the meeting in Saudi Arabia. Contacts with the American side are ongoing.
This is a rare moment where all parties are on the same page, trying to find common ground after a long and difficult journey. While the calm is welcome, it is unclear if this marks the beginning of the end of the war or just a brief pause before tensions rise again.
European Union Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas stated that no agreement to end the Ukraine crisis can be reached without the EU's involvement, as Europe holds key leverage in certain aspects of the negotiations. In an interview with Reuters on the sidelines of the G7 Foreign Ministers Summit in Canada, Kallas asserted that Ukraine's territorial integrity is a red line and that relinquishing any part of it or its land is not an option. And Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi met with Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov and Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister Kazem Gharib-Abadi in Beijing on Friday, where they released a joint statement outlining China's 5-point proposal for resolving the Iranian nuclear issue. Wang, also member of the Political Bureau of the Communist Party of China's Central Committee, emphasized China's commitment to settling disputes through political and diplomatic means, while opposing the use of force and illegal sanctions.
Today, the deputy foreign ministers of the three countries successfully held a Beijing meeting on the Iranian nuclear issue between China, Iran, and Russia, issued a joint statement, which is an important step to the right direction. We will also strengthen communication with other parties in the Iranian nuclear issue and urge them to show political sincerity and return to peace as soon as possible.
And on the same occasion, Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister Kazem Gharib-Abadi affirmed that the Iranian nuclear program is peaceful in nature. It is under the surveillance of the International Atomic Energy Agency.
Iranian nuclear program is peaceful in nature. It is under the surveillance of the International Atomic Energy Agency. Iran is receiving huge inspections from the IAEA, and our nuclear program has never been diverted to non-peaceful purposes.
UN envoy to Syria, Geir Pedersen, said on Friday that it is time to form a genuine and inclusive transitional government. In a statement, Pedersen expressed hope that Thursday's constitutional declaration would steer Syria toward restoring the rule of law and fostering an organized and inclusive transition.
Now is the time for bold moves to create a genuine, credible, and inclusive transitional government and legislative body, a constitutional framework and process to draft a new constitution for the long term that is credible and inclusive too, and genuine transitional justice. The United Nations stands ready to work on these and all other aspects of a political transition in cooperation with the caretaker authorities and all Syrians, and in line with key principles of Security Council Resolution 2254.
Syrian Foreign Minister and his Iraqi counterpart affirmed their countries share destiny and the need to stand together against the threats and foreign interferences. Speaking in Baghdad during Shibani's first visit to Iraq, both ministers emphasized strengthening ties, opening borders, and fostering cooperation.
سوريا والعراق يجب أن يقفا بحزم.
Syria and Iraq must firmly reject any foreign interference in their internal affairs, as their future is determined by the will of their people. Security is a shared responsibility, and opening the borders between the two countries would be a crucial step in strengthening relations, boosting movement, and fostering trust and cooperation. A strong partnership between Syria and Iraq will not only benefit their people, but also contribute to regional stability.
بل ستساهم أيضا في استقرار المنطقة.
نؤيد الاتفاق.
The agreement signed between President Ahmed al-Shara and Commander Mazloum Abdi is significant. We hope both parties will develop and implement it in the best interest of Syria, its stability, and the establishment of balanced relations among all components.
متوازنة بين جميع المكونات.
6 people, including a child, were killed following shelling by Sudan's rapid support forces on the city of Al Ubaid on Friday. A doctor at the city's main hospital told Agence France Presse that the shelling also wounded 8 civilians. Al Ubaid, the capital of North Kordofan state, has endured continuous shelling for 8 consecutive days by the rapid support forces following weeks after the army managed to lift a prolonged siege on the strategically important city in southern Sudan. The African Union expressed deep concern on Friday over recent developments in Ethiopia's Tigray region, warning that rising tensions between 2 rival factions could threaten peace. In a statement, the AU said it is closely and anxiously monitoring developments within the Tigray front, emphasizing the importance of stability and peace in the region. It called on all concerned parties to resort to dialogue. And former central banker Mark Carney was sworn in as Canada's new Prime Minister on Friday. Mark Carney immediately said he could work with U.S. President Donald Trump, who's promising tariffs that could devastate the Canadian economy. Carney is widely expected to trigger a general election in the coming days or coming weeks. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a wrap for tonight's program. Thanks for watching. See you on Wednesday.